So we have a packed agenda for today's office hours. As always, we'll go ahead and get started first with, share my screen. We'll get started with kind of updates from the Semantic Kernel team. We also have a demo that Jose is going to be sharing with us on what he's been building with Semantic Kernel. This is just a good kind of reminder that these office hours, yes, they're for questions, but we'll also be using it as an opportunity to have all of you demo. And then we'll round things off with a Q&A. But probably the most important thing I want to share with all of you today is we have a new team member on the Semantic Kernel team. And she'll be joining if she comes up. Oh, there she is. She is actually joining as our community PM. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Sophia. But before I kind of steal her thunder, Sophia, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself? Tell everyone kind of who you are and how you'll be joining and helping the community?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Matthew. Hi, everyone. Really nice to meet you. I'm joining the Semantic Kernel team from another part of Microsoft within Microsoft Security. So I've been running communities around identity, some of our features in that space, and really excited to join in and hear all of your feedback. I will post in chat a quick survey. There's a few questions we'd love to get some feedback on as well. So if you have a chance to fill that out during today's session, we'd really appreciate it. But looking forward to getting to know all of you.
And I guess while we have you, Sophia, you're going to be dropping the survey in the chat. Do you mind sharing with folks real quick on the sharing your screen on kind of what we're asking and just to demystify and make the survey a little less scary for folks?
Yeah, definitely. One sec. Let me pull it up. Let me know when people can see my screen.
We can.
Perfect. So we just want a little bit of information, understand first, last name, org, email, understand a bit about where you're located and if there's any preferred language that you have for that as well as time zone. But the main meat of what we're wanting to get to and really understand is what are you trying to build with AI? We'd love to understand a bit more in depth. So feel free to give us details there. And then where you're at in your semantic kernel journey for anyone who's just kind of starting or going through and building applications. We'd love to be able to get that feedback and understand. And then what topics you'd like to see in office hours moving forward. There may be ability for roadmap, for customer sessions, other things as well. And so I'd love to be able to understand from your perspective what you'd like as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sophia. I'm super excited to have her on the team. I know before y'all had Alex kind of drive these sessions. I've been filling in and doing Q&A. I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be helping out with the Q&A. But I'm excited for Sophia to start providing structure. And I think the survey is a first kind of stab at it. So please, 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 from the bottom of my heart, go ahead and fill out that form so that we can get your information. Cool. Sophia, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think anything else from my end.
Perfect. Well, in that case, let's go ahead and dive into the updates from the semantic kernel side. Okay. Updates from the team. Okay, so since we last met, the biggest update from our side is we released a new version of the .NET version of semantic kernel. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look at those release notes, and I'll point out some of the things that I find most exciting about this new release. So if we go to our releases, let's go to our code. And we have our .NET 1.4 release that we can go ahead and select. This has quite a bit of new things that have been added. There's been some improvements. I think last time we talked about some of the enhancements that were coming to the handlebars planner so that you can configure it more deeply. So there's a couple PRs attached to that one. I am particularly super excited about the new audio connectors. So if you've wanted to do audio to text or text to audio to facilitate more of a real-time collaborative conversational AI, those connectors are now inside of Semantic Kernel. And you can check out our sample within kernel syntax examples on how to use these new audio connectors. So I'm going to just drop that in the chat for everyone to have access to. That is super exciting. Okay. And just to kind of take a look at what that looks like, just like how you would add an OpenAI connector or service or model, you can now add an OpenAI text to audio connector. Just provide the model ID, the API key. You can change things like the voice. It's super fun to actually play around with the different voices that OpenAI has for these AIs. I'm going to go ahead and join. We're getting some feedback. If I can, maybe I can't. Okay. Seems like someone muted them already. And then things like the speed and the response format. Still getting some feedback. So I'm having trouble accessing Teams. Is someone mind muting that participant? Thank you. All righty. So that's taking some sample text and actually generating audio from it. And then you can also do the same thing of taking audio from a service and then turning it into text. So definitely check that out. Maybe next office hours, I'd love to see a demo from someone kind of showing that working end to end. The last thing I want to share with our 1.4 release is we've made some additional enhancements to our integration with the OpenAI Assistance API. So the main one that I heard a ton of people asking for frankly months now is, when is Azure OpenAI going to support the Assistance API? That happened, I think, a week or so ago. And the next question is, when is Semantic Kernel going to support it? We now have support for Azure OpenAI with Semantic Kernel, so you can start playing around with it. And we also have support for the file service. So before you could add in a file ID, now you can actually upload files to OpenAI using Semantic Kernel so that you can start doing all of your coding inside of Semantic Kernel. Okay. So that is all for the release, pretty jam-packed. So we have planar improvements, we had the audio connectors, and we had enhancements to the Assistance API. So I guess while I'm there, any questions from the community on some of those enhancements related to 1.4? Okay. The last thing I want to share from the updates from the team is we have heard from the community, hey, we want some consolidation of our samples. We want to make them better. Now that Sophia's on board, we're taking another look at simplifying and consolidating these examples. We want to include examples of the things I just talked about, right? One of the ways that we want to kind of make these samples a little bit more easy to use is actually provide a single sample application for you to check out different scenarios that you might want to build. And here we have one where we provide a simple, actually let's do a simple streaming chat with an application. Today, the way we structured our samples, you have to go to kernel syntax examples, which I just showed you previously, right here. You kind of drill down into one of the samples, and there's some code that you can kind of copy and paste, but actually running this easily is a bit hard. And you can't always easily copy and paste it because we have like custom write methods like this.writeLine. And so what I'm showing on your screen is kind of where we're thinking about going with our samples. One thing you'll notice is it's a little bit simpler to kind of copy and paste the code, right? So here we can easily copy and paste these different lines of code. Once you do paste it, you can easily change out the text, right? And I guess my favorite piece is being able to easily run these things. So today they're all kind of run as tests, and it's kind of hard to actually see the output of these things. We're building a user interface that will run inside of your terminal. We'll wait for this thing to build so that you can start playing around with these samples, seeing what they feel and look like before you maybe commit to actually writing any code. So in this particular example, we're just having a simple back and forth where we get some information from the user and we get a response from the bot. Simple stuff, but we want to make sure that even these really simple scenarios are really enjoyable to use. So this is the kind of sample application that we're working on building right now. You'll have different categories of samples. So all of your chat examples, all of your text generation samples. You can imagine these lists of categories growing over time. And if we select one of the samples, let's select the streaming chat one, we'll actually provide you a UI where you can start talking to the agent, right? You can actually experience, can you tell me a story? You can actually start experiencing what it's like to use any of these samples in a turn-by-turn interactive experience so that you know what you're getting when you add it to your own application. So keep an eye out for that. We should have a draft PR for these samples at the end of this week, and hopefully by the end of next week, we can check it in and all of you can start using these samples as you go through your learning journey of Semantic Kernel. Okay. So with that, those are all the updates from the Semantic Kernel team. Before we get to Q&A though, I'd love to do one last bit of samples. As I mentioned, Jose actually has a demo that he's been preparing. So I'd love for you, Jose, to be able to come off mute, share your screen, and we can take a look at what you've been building with Semantic Kernel.
Yep. Well, thanks, Matthew. Well, in fact, it was your idea when we were discussing about things that could make sense to do, right? So let's give credit properly. So there we go. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see that?
We can.
Perfect. Good. So the discussion went more or less along. What could be a nice final project or something that could be interesting to show, or how can I help you as a team? So we have been talking a bit regarding a course I'm preparing also for you or one of your companies, LinkedIn Learning, on this topic, Semantic Kernel, right? And this is a bit to showcase a bit the idea of the power. It could make sense to do so. Okay, yeah. Your point was, why don't we give hands to the kernel? We create a plugin. You have some already that do a few things, but you suggested that planner plugin, so I created this planner plugin that can create a plan, can do a few more things. The code is already open yet to grab, right? So I will paste it later in the chat, and it's completely open source, so no problem there. And I put a plugin base that does a few things like authentication as a client here, and here is doing user authentication, still with a client, but opens a window and lets you authenticate, so it's pass-through authentication, and it's pretty simple. I know people have been asked for that, so that's already implemented. And that's the base class, so we could implement any other thing there. Let me debug, delete or disable all breakpoints, so we don't want anything to stop us, right? And here I can create a plan, I can create tasks, I can do a few more things, but that's more or less the gist of it. And then I have a application that uses them, gets everything with environment variables to be sure and safe, don't put secret in your applications, creates a kernel, what else? And also it gets graph tenant ID, the graph client ID, and the graph client secret that we need to authenticate, and creates a plugin, which is authenticating for the application.
And I guess if we take a step back, so you've shown us some different plugins. People might be starting to figure out what you're trying to build with this thing, but what are you going to be asking the AI to actually do with all the plugins you built for Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Planner?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite clear. I want to make a plan, right? And in this case, I wrote a prompt that will create a plan. And I want it in JSON. Why JSON? Because it's a structure. I can expect the format, and I'm telling it the format more or less. So I'm telling it the key, the IDs that I want to generate. I'm putting some comments to output JSON. I think we have somebody with audio open in the room. So I'm going to silence. Yeah, JPAC, you did that faster than me. And yeah, we are asking it a goal to make a plan for, and I'm proposing one at the moment, right? So plan announcement for the technical company events for 2024, which is something I've been doing for my internal company. Well, the company workforce is live. And yeah, I have another one, but I will leave it a bit as a fun. And I think it's proper to show it, but before I'm going to show what is behind, which is a demo tenant the Microsoft provided me generally, and now it's completely empty, so we have nothing there. And
And for folks on the call, if you're not familiar with this UI, you might be confused when we say Planner. This is Microsoft Planner, which is Microsoft's
yes,
application for managing tasks for your entire team, right? Which is different than our planners, right? But they kind of do the same thing. It helps actually orchestrate, in this case, humans, to accomplish a bunch of tasks. So yeah, Jose, show us what
all right.
you run your app.
So let me run it. I'll probably have to grab it and bring it here from the main screen. Yes, there we go. So that's the planner. The default goal is to generate task, plan announcement for the technical community events for this year, 2024. I want to notate the ideas, brainstorm, blah, 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 seeing, get approval with the CTO and budget, and get the CTO to approve, because otherwise it's not. I could write another one, but at the moment I will say yes, go ahead. And it will first generate with the prompt we saw the task, and then meanwhile it's generating them, I will show the next thing, which is, I think, kind of cool, right? Because I know you love handlebars, right? So here we have a quite interesting one, because I'm setting a variable with the output of a function, which is creating the bucket, right? With the planner, with the plan ID. So that's something I provided before, right? Then I'm getting the bucket ID there with a complex object that I'm receiving on the creation. So it shows how to receive and handle a complex object. And then for each of the task lists provided, I'm iterating and calling the create task element, providing everything. And at the end, I'm asking it, hey, do a funny summary and let the user know that the task has been created and now they have to go and do it, right? So at the moment it generates a task, puts them in Planner, it does not do them for you yet. So let's see there. So the first, it generated the tasks, 12 tasks, annotate initial ideas, conduct brainstorm, blah, blah, present the budget, share, run awareness campaigns, and then outputs, and now it's creating them. And yeah, and the final statement is here. Everything has been created. Have good news, and I have better news. Okay, that's interesting and fun. Good news, I created a stupendously organized bucket in Microsoft Planner 2024 company events planning. Starting task one, sparkling little brain cells. Oh man, that's nice. I would even say that is reading Agatha Christie. You know, these little brain cells. That's yeah, from a very, very interesting detective. I have the challenge. Anybody knows Agatha Christie, a very interesting detective that always touches the mustache? All right, say it in the chat. I'm curious if, oh yeah, Arthur, you win. I don't know what you win, but yeah, you win. So there you have it, tailor-made guide to event planning extraordinary serve. So we close it, we don't need anything else. We go back here, we do a refresh. Yeah, voila. And even in order. Usually I was creating them on top down, so the 12 or the latest one appeared first, but I simply did an inverse with .NET. And here we have sync with the team lead, coordinate, sync, prepare, and present the event plan to the CTO, get budgets and get it approved from the CTO. Okay, he got it right, the most important part. And once approved, you tell, share the announcement on the teams, run awareness campaigns and pre-events. Yeah, that's cool. But we can even ask another more fun thing, which is, I'm asking that. So I'm changing that on the default, go to generate task, and And I went that. All right. Where I'm executing it. Okay, I think I'm going to change simply this. It's easier. And that's it. So the idea is make a plan for 2024 events for Semantic Kernel from now to end of the year. Include some hackathons. We love them, right? Things to motivate, engage developers to code, pre-propose a plan that has an overall preparation, and then one task for each event hackathon. Think on possible types of events, and output the types of events, and you can think as a task like an event, just to make sure that each event gets a task, and assess ideas that you may have. First type of put the assessments and next the events for the rest of the year, starting from end of next month, because we are almost February is over, right? So let's see what we get, right? And I think you may want the code, or Sophia may want the code, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So let's run it, see what happens.
And I guess while you're running this, so you set up authentication, which I know a lot of folks have asked how do you authentication?
Yes.
And then I guess the magic is all you had to do is create a plugin to Planner for it to start creating all these tasks. Is that right?
Yeah, and everything is basically this code, right? So I'm using Azure Identity that does a lot of things for us. I'm creating the graph client, and the graph client is simply gets tenant ID, client ID, the client secret, right? And not too much more. Okay.
And then can you show folks once you're inside of the Microsoft Planner graph plugin?
I'm going to stop it because something in the JSON was not properly generated. So I'm repeating that. Sorry?
Inside of the Microsoft Planner plugin, how you're able to use the authentication that you created.
Yeah, it's completely transparent. So I'm simply authenticating. Let me go plugin base here. So client creates new graph service client. And yeah, at the end, what I get is a client, right? Return new graph service client. And I set it as a, here, maybe I should make it private, but it's just a mere end to show it, right? So I'm using this client. Whenever I use this client, it's already authenticated. And I mean, at the end is an HTTP client made to be used and wrapped with everything that Microsoft Graph, the plugin is, well, the SDK I'm using, the Nugget package is using, right? So, but at the end is whenever the session is still upgoing and working and live, it's authenticated.
Perfect. And then I guess one last question.
Yep.
Can you walk through like what are all the different functions that you gave the AI in the Microsoft Planner?
Yeah, quite a few, right? So if you see, I did a lot more than I need because I wanted to play a bit with that and understand it. But initially, I could even get the user. So I was trying to do a lot more things since the beginning. And then I reverted to, oh, okay, yeah, I just want to create not the plan. The plan should be existing because it's kind of complicated because you need an existing group and it needs to be a SharePoint group and you need to add a user and things were complicated. So at the end, I get an existing plan that needs to exist. And then what I do is I create a bucket asynchronously, which is simply a strongly type object that I do, and then I call the graph client. Nothing more. It's fairly easy when you know how to.
Well, and I think that's what I like about kind of this example is this Microsoft Planner plugin isn't that complicated, right? Each one of those methods is pretty simple. It's just calling out to the Microsoft Graph Service, and then you're describing it with those descriptions so that the AI can call it and create those tasks, which is really exciting.
I think it's cool. All right,
Hey, Jose,
generating task. Yes.
Quick question. When you were going through the process, was there anything that surprised you or any ahas for community as you were going through? I'm just curious when you were going through, what was some of the learnings or just feedback to the Semantic Kernel team?
I mean, what I'm using, there is a PR that Matthew knows about that on handlebars, because something I was pushing and learning. Once you get the hand of it, or the handle of it, better said, right? It's quite powerful, right? And so it's something I hope I can get end of the week these up and running and finish, right? I think Teresa Huang is providing a lot of feedback there. Thanks, Teresa. Teresa, I think Teresa is the proper way to pronounce it. So I hope that will help other people as well to get their hands on the handlebars. And that's really powerful, because if I think it's, yeah, plan a plugin check. I mean, if you look at that, we are writing kind of a code that the model is executing and then invoking back to us um, as a function call if needed be, right? If he has everything, he may ask us to execute parts of this before it even is processed, and the rest it will be as execute as optimal as we can. So I think this part is, when you have a process that you can streamline in a handlebars, I think the best practice I got for me is you should do so, and you should try to simplify. So for that, we had some interactions with Matthew, and what was a bit of an eye opener is he told me, yeah, then simplify the task in 2 or 3 steps, so it is more simple for the LLM to do it. Because at the beginning, I was aiming to do a lot of complex things, and that was not working. That's
Cool.
it.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, now we
This
need
is
to.
done.
Yeah.
Sorry. Making sense of hackathon, taking a look at webinars, putting workshop events under a microscope. So that's a suggestion. A workshop would be nice, maybe when you launch these new agent things. So that's a suggestion for you both. Planning of an epic hackathon for a stunning March. That's too soon, but yeah, I would do that after March, definitely, because I didn't tell them that build is coming, right? You know that. And pulling off another hackathon heat of August. Maybe people are on holidays, but yeah, crafting machine workshop. Well, let's see if we got that done here, and we have to refresh. Yeah, here we have. All right, planning working event and plan hackathon December, or better, some holidays. And yep, seems to work. That's it on my side. Any questions? Meanwhile, I'm here. I take my chance to say, I think I saw Kevin. Hey, hi, Kevin.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Jose, putting a link for your
I
repo
will.
in the
I will do
uh,
that in a moment.
and I think the other thing I like about this is it's showing how the AI can actually manipulate the real world, do something, create tasks. So often we just see these AIs like pull information and give it back to the user. But what Jose showed is you can actually build agents that do things as well, start automating some of your tasks. All right. Well, thank you, Jose. That was a great demo.
Thank you.
All righty. So quick time check. So we have about 30 minutes left. Would love to open it up to questions. I saw one in the chat already, which is from Artur. When is Python 1.0 coming? Soon. So we've been working in a feature branch, wrapping up the final breaking changes. We're hoping to get that in either end of this week or early next week. At that point, we'll probably make a cut for our beta release of v 1.0 that includes most of the breaking changes that are necessary for the Python library. At that point, it still won't be as potentially great as we want, because it'll still be missing some of the auto function calling pieces and some of the agent pieces that people have been asking for. Those will start trickling in as we get more contributions from the community, as our full-time Python developers work on it. Our hope is by build, we have full parity, but at our current velocity, we might actually be a little bit faster than that. So that's an answer to Artur's question. Steve asked, and as a reminder for folks, if you want to raise your hand or come off mute to answer your question, that feel free to do so. Steve asks, sorry if I missed it, but are agents in Semantic Kernel able to have a proxy agent like an autogen to ask clarifying questions back to the user during execution? One of the things I like about how we've developed our agents as kind of as plugins to support hierarchical chat is if you ask the first agent, we kind of call it like the PM agent, a question, if it needs extra clarification, it will actually immediately just ask the user. And so the way we've actually architected, you don't need a user proxy agent because that agent already knows it's talking to a human and it can delegate tasks to other agents. We are working on an agent abstraction that more tightly aligns to autogen. And in some of those patterns, you do need a user proxy agent. And so we're working on an implementation of that as well. But part of what I love so much about treating agents as plugins is it actually simplifies a lot of the code and you don't need things like user agents. If you want to see kind of what that experience looks like in reality, it uses some older code, but I'm going to go ahead and I think this is the right one. Just want to make sure I pull up the right one. Yep, this is it. Okay. So I want to drop in a blog article. Actually shows what it looks like to use agents as plugins. In one of the templates, I actually provide some requirements that, hey, before you answer the user, you have to make sure you get certain information back. And you can actually see that turn-by-turn interaction between the user and the agent without necessarily needing a user proxy agent. Okay. Great question. Artur, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry, Matthew. I just thought I'll ask rather than type in an essay in a chat. So I've got a pretty specific problem that I'm trying to resolve, and I've so far not been able to find an answer. So first of all, I have to be using Python, and second of all, I have to do it all in one, essentially one application, right? Basically, I'm trying to put this whole thing into prompt flow, if that makes sense.
Okay,
so
yep.
Everything has to be self-compiled. And I think I've heard Alex talk about kernel is so great because it's just can be just this one thing. All the samples I've seen so far is all broken down into a separate agent, separate folders, all of that structure. Is there anything that exists right now, as of your knowledge, that I could essentially leverage? All I've seen is this tutorial with the math planner for semantic kernel in prompt flow. That is, yeah, it's okay, but that's not exactly what gets me, gets me on the right path. At least I need somebody, something ideally with RAG, with Azure OpenAI, so what I've seen today from Jose looks absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't wonder if there's something that could help me get something like this working in prompt flow in one function.
Can you tell more about, you mentioned you're interested in doing RAG. Can you speak more of like the scenario you're trying to enable?
Yeah, so basically, quite frankly, I'll be, just brief. I don't want to take too much time, but essentially trying to offer a realistic alternative to clients who are looking for a traditional implementation of Azure OpenAI, where, with this sort of function calling and then do something, call a webhook, get results, call maybe another endpoint. I'm trying to prove to them that you can do the same thing with an agent, works great. I have to, however, be using the same stack as what's currently employed. So I have to be using Python, and I have to implement it in Microsoft Enterprise product like PromptFlow. So it really, it clashes quite a lot. The samples and tutorials I've seen so far don't really, even the accelerator, there's a great semantic kernel in a box accelerator. That is amazing, but it's all .NET, that's all web app, it's just very, very different. The framework is just totally different.
So, and I guess to that point, what we're working on right now with the Python libraries, we're making a lot of, frankly, painful breaking changes so that it looks more like the .NET flavor and gets all of the additional value out of it. So when I say, hey, we plan on having a beta at the end of this month or early March, that's kind of what I would, if I were you, would kind of expect, like, oh, finally the Python library looks more like what's been happening in the .NET side of the house. Because we're making so many breaking changes, that's also why we've kind of pumped the brakes on adding more samples. To answer your first question, are there samples that do exactly what you're asking. Unfortunately, no. As part of our backlog and planning, once we have V1 of Python landed, we of course want to support those things. I guess to point you in the right direction though, so that you're not completely stuck. It sounds like you've tried the math plugin, which is very like basic, like, okay, now I can do some like add, subtract, what have you. If you're trying to do a RAG application, I don't think you would have to do too much different with the math sample in order to start getting the behavior that you want. The one big change is instead of having, of course, a math plugin, maybe it's a search plugin, right? That searches a vector DB of whatever documents the person has. And you might just have one or two methods inside of that search plugin, like query, which takes in a user request and it makes a request to like Azure OpenAI to pull in that information and serve it back to the user. So that's one thing you could try going down if you are if you have familiar with the math plugin example. The other sample that I would recommend you check out. I don't know how up to date it is. I'm going to share it regardless. I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. There's a project, and it looks like there might be some issues with it. They have an error on it right now. But it does kind of walk through how you might build a copilot within Azure AI Studio. And it does some RAG. So it shows how to create a planner and create a plan, and it imports a plugin called customer support. And if we look at what the customer support plugin does, what it has is that search method I mentioned before that will actually search Azure AI Search, pull in the relevant chunks, and return it back to the planner, right? So this might be another thing for you to check out to see if it helps unblock you.
Oh, thank you. I've not seen that particular one. That may be useful, but I'm essentially gonna probably just wait for the SK in a box sort of level of sophistication. That sample from .NET is just amazing. If I had something like that in Python, that would just unlock so many doors. But no, thank you so much, and sorry for hogging so much of the time. But thank you. Great work, everyone.
We are good. Okay, cool. Steve, you have your hand up.
Oh, hey, Matt. So on the as far as like the integration with existing Microsoft Copilots, and I know there's a lot of different Copilots coming out, right? Are we going to be able to, and maybe I don't know if you can give any insight here, but if we're making plugins that are on your Azure Function serverless plugins, or server plugins, whatever, can we integrate into Microsoft's Copilot stacks? Because like I've got a bunch of company RAG Copilots, RAG plugins that are built into Teams right now. We have a kind of a whole Teams chatbot, what have you. And it would be cool though, like certain of these RAG plugins would be really useful in different Microsoft Copilot products, right? Like we're going to give folks, some Word Copilots and give folks access to, the Windows Copilots. And if we could integrate our plugins into some of those, that would be really, really powerful if it's possible.
Yeah. So I don't know how much I can publicly share. So I'll try to parrot what I think has already been announced. So when OpenAI first released their plugin manifest, Microsoft shared that, hey, they would kind of leverage the same thing. I think since that announcement, that was almost a year ago, I think Microsoft's working on a spec that adds like a few additional properties so that they have all the information that they need for the Copilot to use any of the code that kind of you load in. So I think
and that's the open API spec, correct?
The open AI spec that includes an open API spec.
Right. Totally not confusing. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's totally not confusing. So in terms of like, are you doing the right thing right now? Yes. Like if you build it, it sounds like you're using an Azure function, or if you're building a service and you can describe it as an API, you'll be ready once Microsoft does open it up to third parties. I think right now they're testing it with first party teams. Like, can this is kind of conjecture at this point, but can the Word team build a plugin that the Bing Copilot use, right? So that's kind of where we're at on the Microsoft side. You can imagine builds around the corner. Maybe we have an announcement then, but I don't have anything concrete I could share at this point.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. Cool. And I guess one of the things that we've seen through our testing of plugins and having agents use these things is we've also had success building like smart plugins. So similar to kind of like what we previously talked about agents. But if you have APIs, great, you can expose that as a plugin. Theoretically, the copilots can then call it. But there are times where you want the plugin to have more capabilities, right? To have your own AI orchestration within it. So that's another thing I'd recommend kind of folks playing around with. And once there is a story of uploading and integrating plugins into the Copilot stack, you may even be able to upload and add your own agents to the Copilot stack so you can have teams of these things working together within Microsoft products. Okay. And Jose asked, so it's not the best idea to create OpenAI plugins at the moment. So it is safe. What Microsoft is trying to do is be backwards compatible. So if you do have an OpenAI plugin, it should still work with Microsoft products. If it doesn't, maybe there's like a few small little changes. I feel confident sharing with all of you that if you build an OpenAI plugin, it's not going to be wasted work, right? But I think if y'all have looked at the OpenAI spec, in fact, let me go ahead and it's fine. If you have looked at the OpenAI spec, it's really simple. All it really does is add a description for the agent. The heart of what you're building is the actual plugin itself and the APIs. So kind of what Jose showed with the Microsoft Planner plugin. That's the most important work. That is what's kind of reusable no matter what happens in the future. So I think it's pretty safe to build that in the time being. Until all this stuff is integrated and y'all can plug and play into it. Okay. Jose, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. So basically, I more or less saw this coming because when the OpenAI thing happened back in November, yeah, suddenly a lot of things stop, very hard to stop. Like this wrapper that you have, this application for wrapping what I did today and adding a lot of things, that was brilliantly done, but suddenly there was no more voice about that or not really push. So I understand that this will come in the shape of a Azure function or a new kind of project that will do everything for us, more or less. Or I hope it will be like that.
So we will not be so opinionated as to say, oh, you need to use an Azure function, right? Like we want it to be a point where you can have any way you want to expose an API, whether it's a Flask app, whether it's a Azure web app, whether it's an Azure function, like it shouldn't matter. All that really matters is when you give the AI your API that it's described semantically. And on the semantic kernel side and Microsoft side, most of that information is already baked into open API specs, right? And there's like a few additional things that we need additional descriptions on that will be part of this plugin specification.
Yep. Love where this is going to. This OpenAI agnostic, working with local models. One thing I see, and it's my wish, when I do a few things with agents, I cannot see the cost incur, the internal conversations, unless I control with code the interactions directly on the thread and print everything. But it's really hard to see the cost and to see the interactions. That's a wish. My wish is when you are implementing these, I'll be watching on the PRs. It would be so great that we have a layer of observability that tells what's going on, kind of something that records the interactions like a graph. That would be the best way to show that visually.
So we have some work on our backlog to add more telemetry to our agents. So as they're talking, you can kind of see the actual back and forth. Would that be sufficient, or are you looking for kind of at the end of this an actual graph structure of all of the conversation that took place for you to kind of do deeper analysis? Like, is log, or do you need that graph?
Log helps, but there is a limit to what you can understand if you don't see that visually, right? So what I think is a graph at the end, like you are adopting AutoGen, right? And AutoGen has something which is AutoBuilder that creates not only agents, but creates chat rooms with many agents on them, so it can escalate and so if you could see that real life, what's going on with the arrows and information flowing, the time, that would be amazing. That would be fantastic.
So you're looking for some more tooling to help kind of visualize how these things are.
Yes, because we will end up needing that. We need to do that if we want to supervise what's going on. Because at the end, we will be only not to create two agents talking to each other. We will be able to create a complete chat room that's writing an article, another one which is researching internet or whatever in either tags or, and these things will be working together. So if you don't watch it in a kind of graphical way,
Yeah,
we'll be lost pretty quick.
And I guess like what AutoGen has done is like there's a web portal that you can kind of go to. That's one route we can go. We've played around with VS Code extensions in the past. Is there a particular home that you'd be interested in seeing this type of tooling, this visualization of these agents collaborating, working together?
I mean, you have done an amazing thing here in this graph tool that shows a lot of things already. Is we mentioned that before. It's prompt flow, right?
Yep.
Well, but here we have a problem. Why not do one that has agents on it and shows the interaction with agents, and we can see the live tracing. So you there have the technology to do the things.
I guess to make the question more pointed, if we built like an extension for VS Code, would that be sufficient for you? Or I guess in your demo, you're using okay, that would
Yes.
be okay.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic.
Cool. Great. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Jose. Harish asks for a RAG application when using Semantic Kernel with kernel memory. Is it possible to get citations? It's been a while since I've looked at the kernel memory project, which as a FYI, that is more of a research project. AutoGen is also a research project. They highly don't recommend folks pushing out to production at this point. So I'm not sure if kernel memory provides citations. Assuming it does, though, you should be able to take that information and present it through the user. We probably need to have some samples to make that a little bit easier. I'm trying to think about how one would actually do it, and it's not immediately jumping to mind. So Harish, let me take that as an action item, as a sample that we need to provide. I might not use kernel memory, but I do want to make sure that we can show citations as part of a back and forth chat with Semantic Kernel. Alrighty, and I'm looking at some of the other questions. I guess while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I just want to bubble up Sophia's survey one more time. I'm just going to copy and paste that link. Okay. Please take the survey, give us the information, tell us more about yourself. We'll be using this. It seems like this hour is probably okay for this audience, but knowing kind of where you are based, if we do need to have different times, that'll be great. And we want to make sure that we can prepare the right content for all of you. If there's a bunch of people that are just now getting started with Semantic Kernel, I can see how a lot of the questions that are in the office hours today can be very advanced, right? It might be hard to follow. And so if there's a number of y'all that are just getting started, we'd love to know it in the form so that we can also provide you with getting started office hours so that you can start using Semantic Kernel for the first time. Okay. So we have 5 minutes left. So I will just pause to see if there's any other questions. Otherwise, thanks everyone for showing up for today's office hours. And I'm excited to see y'all next week. Definitely share any questions that y'all have. If you have a demo, please reach out to us either on Discord or on GitHub, or you can send an email to our alias. Let me just pull that guy up. Okay. And we'd love to have you present, similar to Jose, all the cool things that you're building. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.
Oh, there was one more question. Tristan asked, we saw today that work is underway to update Chat Copilot to v1.4, kind of timelines. So I think most of the work has been finished. The biggest change is we deprecated the sequential planner, and our Chat Copilot was very tightly coupled to that. So we are looping in our planner expert. They're going to be doing some costing. My expectation is maybe like a sprint or two, which for all of you, that might be like 2 to 4 weeks. And at that point, we'll be able to release an updated version. We will probably not be supporting it after that. We'll basically just make sure that Chat Copilot has a support for V1, which is a long-term supported thing. We heard enough customers that were using it in production that we wanted to make sure that they could use the latest and greatest with Semantic Kernel. But longer term, we do recommend folks finding other solutions to build on top of Semantic Kernel. Alrighty, thanks everyone. Cheers.